Oh, good for you.
Okay. Looks like Morgan has got us on YouTube Live, so we're close. We'll plan on starting on time, about 30 more seconds.
Hey,
Okay, looks like it's 4:30. Morgan, are we ready to go? I'll take that absence. There she is.
Yep, we are. Go ahead.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Okay, just like to welcome everybody up to the Royce City Council work session, December 15th, 2020. The meeting started at 4:30. We want to welcome and recognize that we have Councilmember Saxton with us, Councilmember Wilson, Councilmember Burrell, and Councilmember Jackson, but we have not seen Councilmember Paul. So with that, we'd like to go ahead and jump into the work session. This is a discussion that we'd like to have between the council members on important issues that you have brought to the table. And so I've asked you if you would plan on both Brian, we have a couple more on your list and we have a couple on Jan's list. If you will go ahead and I'll open it up and then just give us some idea of what you're thinking. Brian, you indicated that you had an interest and a concern about how many living units in a mixed-use development per acre. 200 units per acre is too many. Maybe you'd like to clarify maybe what you're thinking there.
well, along, not just in this project area, but along the 1900 West corridor, they were looking at that many, or we've discussed anyway, that many apartment units on 1900.
Okay, so this would be from Riverdale Road all the way down to the Davis, Weber County border. Is that what you're referring to?
Right.
Okay.
And I wasn't certain that we were after that many units along that stretch. I thought we were gonna save some of that for commercial, where it's one of our prime commercial areas, so close to the freeway interchange.
Steve's got his hand up.
Somebody can correct me or correct what I've heard, or
Okay, just for clarification, I'm sensing that your comment is more about just making that all residential and not mixed use. That's what I'm sensing, because you're concerned about there being too many residential units and you're concerned there would not be commercial properties in anywhere along that. Is that kind of what I heard you say?
yes. And actually, the number that I was given was 1,000.
Okay, so Steve, go ahead. He's talking about from Riverdale Road all the way to the Weber County border. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, just a couple questions. You say this project area. I'm not quite sure what you mean by project area. Just what Woodbury wants to do or the entirety? Last I heard from Woodbury, phase 1 would include 250 units, but over the entire downtown area, it would be 1,000. Now that's just potential. It doesn't mean that's how it will develop. It won't mean that's how it's going to do. But let's put this in perspective. If the entire downtown developed in apartments or residential units, 200 units per acre makes us just as dense as New York City, which is not what we're going to do. It's not what we're proposing. If every parcel in downtown went multifamily, and again, the first floor of every building has to be or commercial. So we're talking about, floors 2 through 5 or 6 or whatever the height is. You're only going to get about 36 units per acre, not 200. That's if everything is built out that way. And again, you're going to have parking. You're going to have some buildings that are just going to be single story. You may have, a 2-story office complex. So we can't necessarily say the whole thing's going to be 200 units per acre.
But the 1,000 figure comes from Woodbury.
No, that's their projected for the entire downtown.
That's right. So you put 1,000 apartment units along that stretch in Roy. Where are you going to put business? Because not everybody is going to fit in that business box on the first floor.
Well, most of those 1,000 aren't going to be spread out. Most of them are going to go vertical. So if you talk Woodbury 250, that's vertical in 1 unit, or maybe 2 units on each side of Harmon's. It's not talking put the whole strip in mixed use residential. It's talking certain buildings as mixed use residential.
Okay, so having said all that, Brian, obviously you have a number in your mind. What number do you think is a good number that should be included in terms of not 200 people per acre, but what's a good number?
Well, according to Steve, the number won't be 200 per acre,
okay,
which is good. But I'm concerned. You've got businesses on 56 that are going to want to stay in Roy, and we're going to have a large number of apartment units that stretch along that corridor, and I just think
Nobody's
that
forcing
we want
businesses
to
out.
be like other cities to the south.
Okay, so here, let me ask maybe a broader question. I think what you're assuming and you're telling the council basically is that by proving this document, there will be all of downtown Roy will be mixed use. And in doing so, we could see, and I sense your concern would be an avalanche of a lot more residential, recognizing that in my mind's eye, not everybody will want mixed use. In fact, some of them are very capable and comfortable having, like Harmon's is capable of having 1 level. So I guess my comment would be is that is your scenario suggesting is that every square foot from Riverdale Road to the border is actually going to be mixed use, and that becomes troublesome to you?
Well, the numbers certainly concern me.
Okay,
And
what's a good number? What do you think you'd like to do?
Can I ask a question while he's thinking about that?
Mhm.
Or Steve, jump in, Steve.
Yeah, Steve.
Well, I mean, we also got to take into account, because I spoke to Randy about this particular thing, and he can jump in if he wants, but within that kind of proposed thought of what downtown could look like that Woodbury is involved with, this also includes, 1,000 units throughout all of downtown, which includes 150,000 square feet of office, about 150,000 square feet of retail. So just by the numbers, even from Woodbury, if everything was developed according to what this code would be, you'd have 300 1,000 square feet of potential retail and office. So again, as the mayor had said, not everybody is going to develop mixed use. There will probably be several, but not all of them. I mean, you look downtown Ogden, every building can be 12 plus stories, but how many story buildings are above 10?
But it
There's about 5.
it still begs the question, if we're not going to put commercial or the majority of our commercial on 1900 West, I'm asking, where are we going to put it? I
Well,
mean,
Okay, but to your question, you're going back and saying is you're saying that the council is going to allow residential only. Therefore, there is no commercial. And what I think Steve was saying, and it's surely in the document, every bit of every mixed-use development, if the developer chooses to do that, has to have commercial. So and then that's assuming that the places who don't have anything to do with mixed-use development, anybody down there, and there'll be lots of people that don't, then the question is going to be is that why would they be concerned? They're already commercial, they'll stay commercial. So I guess I'm concerned that the perception you're leaving with me is that what we're doing here is we're going to drive all these residential units downtown 1900. There will be no more room for commercial. And Steve, that's not what the document says. The document says, for the most part, every bit of that property has to have a commercial component. That's what it says
You
today.
can't have residential without commercial.
And you could control that if you simply say, and it was a conversation Diane was having earlier, and we talked about this. If you want to go up there and say that there are sections that we'd like to have only commercial, then define what those are. I made a recommendation, sit down with Steve, draw on a map and say, we'd like these corridors to be only commercial. No mixed use, just flat commercial. And then we do that. And that becomes part of the document. That's okay. But I think we can work that out if you can tell us what you want, and then we define that. Diane, you had a comment you wanted to add to this.
I was going to ask to clarify, Steve, when they're talking about 1,000 units, what kind of land area is that? Is that them themselves on their property, or is that talking about the Core A, all of Core A?
The entire downtown,
Okay, Core A.
Core A, Core B in general.
All
Yep.
right. And when you talk about the 150,000 square foot of office and retail, that again is over the entire downtown area.
Mhm.
So that may be individual or that may be ground floor. It could be either when they're talking about that.
Right.
Okay,
Randy will probably know more than I.
Yeah, can I add to this?
yes, thank you.
So let me add to this. So again, when we talk mixed use development, you could actually have a 5-story office building that might be 3 stories of office and 1 story of residential on top of it. It could also be a building that might have the first floor being commercial, 2 floors office, and maybe another 2 floors of residential. So I think what's really important here, and unfortunately we haven't got this completed, but we started with Woodbury, and Woodbury was paying half of the cost to do a downtown master plan where we could kind of show the council where we thought the better areas would be to build our commercial, to build our mixed use, our residential, to build our office and things like that. But we kind of put that on hold because until we know if we're going to be able to do a mixed use development, there was no need to continue to spend money on a plan that may or may not be applicable for the downtown. But what Woodbury's concept was, and what Woodbury talked to us, and again, this is a concept for the downtown. It's not just a Woodbury plan, but Woodbury and our consultant that we were using indicated that they believed that you could have up to 1,000 units in the downtown area between, that's the Sunset border and Riverdale Road. And you could build up to, is actually 300,000 square foot of office in that same corridor, as well as add a potential 125 to 150,000 square feet of commercial. And the reason the 150,000 square feet of commercial came up is because every building that you build that is a residential development is going to have the first floor commercial. So that's where that number came up. So again, I stress that what's important here is twofold. First of all, every one of those, the downtown produces so much revenue to the general fund budget today. There's so much sales tax that comes in there. There's so much property tax that comes from there. There's franchise tax. And we need to quantify what is that amount of money. Because when we do approve developments, we want to make sure that that development gives us, if it's taking away commercial, we need to make sure that it's giving us the commercial that gives us the same amount of value and revenue that comes into the general fund at a minimum. What we're hoping is it will actually produce more, but it needs to produce a minimum. And that way, if we look at, for example, let's take the Woodbury block, the property they own. If by some chance they were to buy out Arby's and buy out the cafe, we need to know what is that revenue that was generated by those two properties into our general fund. And then as we do our development agreement with them, we need to say, look, you need to put back X amount of commercial property in your project that generates X amount of dollars in sales tax so that we're not losing the revenue that we had. So as we move forward with this development, we want to look at each and every development, and we want to have a baseline value of what is the current revenue being generated from that, and make certain, particularly, and we can do this, particularly if a developer is asking for an incentive to put into an agreement, you have to produce back that exact amount of revenue to us so that we're not losing, but we're gaining from your developments. But Steve was right. This is a plan for the entire downtown, not just core A, but it's all of the cores where you might be able to put this type of development in.
Hey, Brian, what else, what do you want and what do you need from this part of the conversation?
Well, with the widening of 5600 South, which is going to take place within the next couple of years, I'm worried where those businesses will have an opportunity to locate. That's one. And two, when we talk about the corridor from Riverdale Road to the Sunset border, we've got to look at a way to maybe reduce the number of apartment units through that corridor, because Harmon's isn't going anywhere, and they're going to be a part of the downtown, and Burger Bar's not going anywhere, and you know what I mean? So really, where's this all gonna go? And
It may not go anywhere. I mean, to your point is, I think what you're proposing is we're forcing. There is nothing in this provision that says that you have to do this. If a business like, for a better word, Crown Burger wanted to come into Roy and put it along the 1900, they can build a one-story building and put a Crown Burger there. They do not have to have a mixed-use development to do that. There's nothing in this policy, nothing in this document says they do. There's nothing that says if a business one says, I want to put a 3-story office building in, no residential. There is nothing in this document that says they have to. The issue is, and it really comes down to this, where you allow the where you allow the property owners to decide whether they want to have mixed use or not. That's really the question. And if the question is you don't want them to have that choice, then that's the decision. then what you've got is what you've got today. There is no mixed-use development in downtown Roy today. There is none. There is no mixed-use development for the most part anywhere in this city. So the question then becomes is that if you're concerned about making sure there's current available property, then I ask the question is, all you're doing is offering a property owner an option. If they choose not to take that option, they don't have to. And I think that really is what it comes down to. So I'm sensing that you feel comfortable about the 200 units, that it's not going to be 200 units like downtown New York. But you're going to have to help us here, Brian. Help us to understand what kind of language do you want in this document that's going to make you feel comfortable that we can get the council to agree with. And that's what we need to know. If your answer is, I want to preserve certain portions of the downtown 1900 to be commercial only, then tell us what you want. And let's get that on a piece of paper and let's see if the council agrees, and we'll put it into the document. But you got to tell us what you want.
Mayor, if I could just add one other thing.
Go ahead.
When Woodbury was talking about some of the residential development, they weren't just looking at 1900. They were also talking about looking at all that storage units that are behind Harmon's and in that area, and for that to become some residential. So it could be that some of this residential may not be built right on the 1900 corridor. It may be built on storage shed property that's producing very, very little revenue to us. And I drove up there and kind of drove around to get an idea of how much property there is. And you could, if you went vertical in that area, you could probably put half of what we're talking about of their units in the downtown area there. And I'm not quite sure if any council member would have a problem with that use being changed to a mixed use type of thing, because it certainly would generate more revenue than what we're getting today. And it doesn't impact any.
Yes, you're right. But it's also, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, under this proposed chapter 13, that is also, if it's approved, allows them, if that storage units he's referring to can be redeveloped to be mixed use if they wanted it.
Correct.
And if you looked at that, I don't think there'd be a real problem with that, because I mean, that doesn't impact any businesses.
Well, but I haven't heard the argument that talks about impacting. What I think Brian was suggesting is he knows that 5600 is going to be impacted. Whether you realize this or not, the changes that will be taking place next year in 2021 and 22 will impact some of those businesses when they widen 1900 to accommodate. The question is, where do those businesses go?
Well, if we let some people that have property in downtown develop the way they want to, there would be space for
There would be
places.
space. But UDOT has to widen that road. They're going to do that in 2021 and 2022. And there's going to be businesses that are going to be lost as a result. Where do they go? Because there is no place to go today. So unless we come up with a solution to allow them to have options, they don't have options. And that's the worst part about this conversation is the purpose of this mixed use document was more about creating an opportunity for more options. And that's one of the things that we wanted to do. And right now there are no options. Okay, Brian, I'm sorry, Diane.
As part of this, I have two questions, probably to Randy for the first one. Randy, you were talking about how we can, look at the revenue and make sure that what replaces would be equal revenue. I'm also wondering, there's kind of two components to the city center. One is revenue, but one is also services offered or lifestyle opportunities. Does that ever come in? And I think we talked about that a little bit in regards to using some RDA funding as incentivization, but how is that measured? We can measure revenue easily. How do we measure the replacement of lifestyle or retail options that might be eliminated, and how would we keep that? Because most of the citizens really want certain types of, they want retail options, and revenue is part of it. I was just wondering how we put that into play.
Diane, that's a really good question. So let me tell you what I do currently. So when a proposal is submitted to the city for development, it doesn't matter whether it be redevelopment or whether it be built on new property and or vacant property, and a developer wants incentives from the city. We do what's called an economic benefit analysis. And when we do that analysis, what we're looking at is we're looking at what is the development doing and what is the benefit it brings to us. But we also look at what is going to be replaced by the development. And also we look at what is the cost of services that the city might have to provide to that development. And then what we do is we take a look at those numbers and we look at what the incentive is being asked, and then we adjust the incentive accordingly. So if this development's going to cause more services to the city, and even though we're asked to give a portion of our property tax, which is the tax increment to this development, if we find the cost of services is going to be more than that, then we'll go to the developer and either adjust his percentage down, or in some cases just say, look, your cost of services is going to be more than what the incentive is. And really, we need to keep that revenue for the cost of services. As I mentioned, I think in our last work session, if we feel that we need to have a retail component in that development, we can dictate by the development or the tax increment participation agreement that for our incentive, in return, they need to build X amount of retail space so that we're getting that retail component. So that's something we can control with development agreements and tax increment participation agreements, particularly if the developer is coming in and asked us to participate with tax increments. So we can control that.
So when you talk about the economic benefit analysis, you were talking about revenue, but you're also, somehow there's a way to
Yes.
more specifically say, well, we hate to lose those restaurants, so even though maybe the restaurant doesn't make as much money, we want that service available. And there is some sort of formula we can use to be fair to everyone when we talk to them about that.
Yes, we can. And we can control that through agreement. And basically, the bottom line is if they don't do or perform the way they do, we don't provide the incentive. We keep the incentive. So I think we have an opportunity to look at lifestyle. I think we have the opportunity to look at cost of services. And we have an opportunity to look at revenue on in each development. And it would be my recommendation. In fact, what I think we ought to do, and I think we talked about this maybe before, we should put an incentive policy together and bring that back to the redevelopment agency at the proper time that outlines some of these things that we've talked about that would have to be provided by the developer and have the developer pay for it as part of the cost. And that is what we use. And then we bring that back to the redevelopment agency board, which is the city council. And we share with you what that economic benefit is, what that is. And then you've got a tool that allows you to make an informed decision on whether or not you're going to participate in the development and whether or not what's being proposed needs to be changed as far as uses go.
Okay, thank you. And my second part probably may or may not be specifically a question, but it seems to summarize maybe what we're trying to ask is, how can we ensure a location for nice destination retail businesses when something else might be more profitable than that? Maybe the high-rise apartments are more profitable, but we still want to ensure that location. So it sounds like we're talking about some possible options or some possible solutions to that question, because a lot of those won't be as profitable, but they do in regards to revenue, but they will be profitable in regards to pay or customer citizen satisfaction. So
Okay, Steve, you had a
yeah,
comment you want to make to that?
yes.
It wasn't a question, but it was. What I got out of it is we want to ensure that certain properties are available for certain business types. Then we as a city need to purchase that land, and then we can guarantee and ensure what happens. Other than that, it's up to a private property owner to sell it to another private property or company to build what they want. So the only way you can really ensure the product or the use is buy the land.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you
the
for
RDA
that.
board can buy the land.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
What
Okay.
Ogden's done, Ogden City, Ogden RDA has bought up a lot of property in downtown Ogden.
They're doing that. Okay, Brian, so the first question you have would be is, come back to some recommendations if 200 units per acre, and I think Steve did a good job suggesting 200 units per acre is downtown New York. That's not what we're talking here. But if you have some recommendations that you think it should be, bring those back to the book council and let's work through those. But you brought up a second question. Need to avoid impact to existing business. Okay, you want to elaborate on that question?
Well, I think they actually, the two might go hand in hand. We've got some business or businesses that are concerned, and they're long time businesses. I'm just asking, what can we do to put these businesses at ease that they won't be impacted? Because that's something that we seem to run into with a handful of businesses that have been here.
Well, okay, Steve, you can probably answer better, but let me just make sure we understand. My concern fundamentally with your question would be is, I'm not the property owner. And the property owner may say, I want to do something else with my property. And now the question is going to be is, I got long-term leases that are up. And much like we've seen with that Sinclair station, and much like we've seen by that Japanese business, it was right next restaurant next to them, they have vacated that property. Royce City will not get any revenue with the exception of property tax for anything that happens at those two locations today, because they're no longer in business today. Now, Royce City didn't do anything to that, and nor, I'm still somewhat surprised at this moment why those two businesses have shut down. But the property owner made a decision to shut down. And it didn't ask for my input, didn't ask for in fact, we don't have an input on that. So again, if the property owner has a wish to do something else with their property, then they're going to make that property. And some of the business owners that may be on that property, that may be an issue between them and the property owner, not Royce City. All Royce City is suggesting is we're ready to create a code that allows the property owner to look at options. They may elect to simply says, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to leave it as it is. And that's perfectly acceptable. Steve, comment.
Well, I don't want to pull a journalist on a journalist's question, but today's code, how are we avoiding impacts to businesses?
We're not.
So that, I don't know, I guess, because if, again, like if Arby's wanted to sell and somebody else comes and tears it down and builds something else.
My question was, how do we put them at ease? Not the fact that we're impacting them, but what can we do to put them at ease, to let them know that what they've said is important to us, but they will not in fact be impacted for X, Y, and Z.
I'm going to turn the table really quick on you, Brian.
Go
We
ahead.
had a nice restaurant in downtown Roy that we have another one here still in Roy, thank goodness. But Warren's, great restaurant in downtown Roy. They decided to sell out. We made revenue off of that because it was a tax generating. They put a car wash in there. We get nothing out of that. But we didn't have a say on that. We had no say of Warren selling out their property to a car wash. It's the same thing. If a property owner wants to do something, we can't guarantee that other businesses aren't going to be impacted. That's between the property owner, the leasee, and the leaser.
Right. So to answer your question, Brian, the best way to make sure that basically nothing happens downtown is for Royce City not to do anything downtown.
But
That's really the answer.
All the other cities around us are are growing up and Roy's not. I mean, that's very
It's the,
apparent.
it's the only way you can look at it, because any decision the five of you make, you are the policy makers of everything that happens in Roy City. Any decision, whether you put streetlights out there, whether UDOT's going to put widen the road, anything that you choose and want to do to downtown, you choose that. And that's the point here. But here's the key, Brian, and it's absolutely true. To answer your question is, how do we make sure that nobody in downtown is impacted? Don't do anything.
Mayor,
Don't do a thing.
But that isn't what I said.
But that's what you're asking.
Coming back, I'm saying, how do we put them at ease? How do we put them at ease? I didn't say, let's not move forward.
Th-
I
but-
said, how do we put them at ease?
Okay, then let me give you a good example. A conversation took place with a company called Dilly Dallies. Between the leaser and the leasee, a decision was made, and that business is moving. They didn't ask for our approval. I can't help to think that the people that own Dilly Dallies is really not at ease at this very moment. But we had nothing to do with that decision, and yet it happened. Much like we don't have decision in what's taking place with other businesses that will not be in business when this pandemic is over. They are done. And I don't know how to fix that.
Mayor,
So the point I want to suggest to you is, and it's a good question, I don't know how you're not going to do that. What we're only going to do is this. If the council approves this document, is we're going to create an option for them. That is all. The decision of what they do from that point forward is between the landowner and the business. It's up to them what they want to do. And if they don't want to do anything for the next 5 or 6 years, 10 years, 20 years, don't do anything,
Mayor, can I ask a question of Brian?
please.
Brian, do you have an idea of how that could happen? Do you have something in mind, or as one of your business contacts given you an idea of something that could put them at ease?
Well, I know you recall when we went door to door just this past summer with the business community, and how pleased and how they responded to us knocking on their doors, and the council all involved themselves, and we got it done. And it was in regards to the grant money. And per business that I had an opportunity to stop in, it was shared with me, hey, thank you for caring. Just thanks. Thanks for going the extra mile. And like I told them, if I don't go the extra mile, the mayor's gonna cuss me. But it doesn't matter. I want to make sure, as silly as it sounds, that when this decision is made, that we all can wear white hats.
So is there something specific we could do right now to move toward that, Bri?
I think as we have these workshop meetings, it might be nice to let the public know that we're still meeting and we're still discussing, and we're taking a hard look at existing business and future business.
Well, it's my understanding is I have contacts that people truly are sensing our commitment to listening to them, but but maybe I'm not hearing the right thing. I mean, I think people listen to us and listen in as I've heard them say that they're hearing our meetings. These are open meetings. I think they would certainly hear your concern tonight and
I hope so, because
so I think that's about all we can do at this point is to let them know that, hey, we're still in discussion and we're talking about specifics. I think the general philosophical discussion, we pretty much beat that down to the point that we need to get into some specifics, and then we can move forward with what, if we come up with a specific that is not liked, I think we'll hear that.
Yeah, and I agree. One thing, Jan, that's important, however, let me just give you some examples. I mentioned the Sinclair Station. I mentioned the Japanese restaurant. I'll make mention of Dr. John's. Those three facilities are vacant. They are not providing us any benefit except some property tax, but there's no value right now from them. What would you want to do with that property? Would you today, knowing that they're vacant, would you entertain allowing the property owner to come in and do something with their property?
Well, I think, Mayor, like what is being proposed is if a mixed use were there, it wouldn't detract from our business district. It could generate more, but it certainly wouldn't necessarily generate less. Is that correct?
And Randy's point was, he was saying is, if there was some type of incentive involved, you as an RDA board would demand as an RDA board that there are certain things that you want to have happen there if you're going to incentivize that. So yes, I agree.
But
Steve, you wanna weigh in?
even if we didn't incentivize them, Mayor, we're not detracting from our business district because our mixed use says there has to be commercial, so much
Well,
commercial
and
per.
Wouldn't Harmon's love to have 250 tenants right next to them? Wouldn't Burger Bar love to have 250 tenants within walking distance of any of those businesses downtown? Putting a mixed use development will bring more business for them.
But
No
even
question.
with that, Joe, it won't detract from the business
Correct.
because it has to be mixed use. Is that my
Yep.
understanding?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay,
If
Steve,
they
go
want
ahead.
housing, it has to have commercial with it.
Steve, go ahead.
Steve has his hand raised.
I can have it as long as possible. I think some of the concern, Brian, you may have, to ease their mind. I know Diane had talked with the Fowers with Own Burger Bar. They have since contacted me. I've had a sit-down meeting with Joe, gone over all his concerns, all his, everything. He had his booklet out there, and him and I had a 30-40 minute talk. And I think when he walked out of there, he was more relieved to know what the document says, what it doesn't say, what he can do. Because we talk specifics, he's saying, not tomorrow, but in 5 years, I might want to expand my business. Can I? And we went over what he could and couldn't do, and what the current ordinance would require and what the proposed ordinance would require. So if you have businesses that are concerned with the proposed ordinance, I'm more than happy to talk with them to ease their mind. I've had probably 4 or 5 discussions with current property owners, they had concerns, and I hope I've eased their minds enough that, they're not feeling threatened or, that everything's going to get demolished and rebuilt. So if that's the case, please send them my way.
So aren't most
Thanks, Steve.
businesses that know about this, that have concerns, wouldn't you think that they would contact the city and ask those questions? Once we get out the survey and more people know about this, then hopefully they'll come to us and we can answer those questions. When we talk about retail, I guess I'm just thinking of how the country is right now. I mean, I can't see a clothing store or anything like that moving in. I think of maybe a unique little record store or something unique that nobody else has or nothing else is in Roy, because retail, I think that's kind of a thing of the past, in my opinion.
It
I
looks
mean,
very different for sure.
Yes,
Lots of
I can
retail.
see some little boutiques or, a few little things like that, but nothing major retail moving into the city. I could see restaurants, but only unique little retail stores is what my vision is.
So what I'm hearing you say, Ann, is no box stores. I mean.
No,
Yeah.
no box stores.
So a mixed use development would lend to that because it would be small on the bottom.
Right.
Is that what I'm hearing you say?
A
Yes.
deli, a coffee shop, things
Yeah.
like that would contribute to not only the people that live above it, but to other people in the city.
Right. I can't see a box store being built again. I mean, that's just.
Yeah.
me.
There's some real limitations in terms of that particular type of retail business. You're right, Ann.
The
Okay,
internet's
now
killed.
we're getting close here. I want to make sure we cover a couple things. And by the way, I still need to read my anchor statement that says, so I'm going to get that in before we depart. Okay, so closing, Brian, I think the solution might be Steve's comment that says the business that we think might have a problem or there's a problem needs to sit down with Steve and talk about what this will and won't do to them, to try to help them, make them feel better, that it doesn't impact them in the way they may think it might. Okay, so with that, let me get one of questions with Jan, you got one. Your question is,
Well, I've got a whole bunch, but maybe it would be best if I just kind of sit down with Steve first.
Okay.
And streamline the process, and mine are a little bit more ticky than philosophical, I guess is what I want to say. So I'm seeing some wisdom in moving forward with this, and I have some ticky questions that I can work with Steve on, and then I'll bring them to the council if I feel uncomfortable with them. Is that okay, Mayor?
I like that. Thank you, Jan. We'll
Okay.
work that then. Let me do this if we can. We just got a couple supple leave it with this. Both Diane and I have a couple other questions we want to put on the table. One would be is if you go into the section 13-22, this is in the document itself. I would like you to consider removing the word residential. This deals primarily with those townhouses. Remove the word residential on the first floor and put in there the word retail. The argument would be is that on those particular types of townhouses, which are authorized, they can be 100% retail, or excuse me, 100% residential. And I think to the conversation that Brian was talking about, the idea would be is we'd want to make sure that all of that commercial property today retains some commercial element tomorrow. So if there's a proposal in front of the council or in front of the planning commission, if this is approved, that says we want to take the road 1915 and we want to put on road 1915, which is not in A, it's over on the B corridor or C corridor. In fact, I think the only place you can put this is in C corridor. Then the bottom line is going to be or the general area, you can't put the townhouses anywhere but in that corridor. Well, if that be the case, they could put a whole row of townhouses in there and we'd lose all that commercial space. I'm asking you to consider changing the wording from residential to retail. Steve.
Which building type is that?
Give me the building types. It's also assumed to be townhouses. I haven't got my
Well,
document.
you got row
That's it.
buildings,
It's in row homes.
which are strictly general, not
Right.
for B.
That's right.
And row homes are simply just that. They're not really a commercial type building.
Right. But
Let's
it's
say
talking
that-
about putting they're talking about putting residential units in a commercial lot under
Well-
general area. And
Well, if we-
specifically, page
I could pull
13.
up the map, but most of those generals have very little commercial in them. I guess 1950 does, but on the west side of it, yeah, okay.
What about the east side of,
What-
what
I don't
about
know
the
in a
west
row
side of
home if you-
1900?
I don't know if in a row home or a townhouse, you're gonna get commercial on the first level. If you look at what we mandated down on 4,000 in Midland, we said so much of your development has to be commercial. So
Yes.
not saying first floor, say 25% or 30% of your development has to be commercial.
Yes, that's what we said. And that's happening, by the way. But
Yeah.
my comment would be is if you read the wording, they don't have to do that unless you put a percentage or you change the wording that requires that. Now, remember, row homes or anything in that environment don't have to necessarily be stacked. You can have under a mixed-use development, for an example, you can have them on a vertical level and a horizontal. They can go either way. But if they want to put row houses, this is on page 13-22, section 7, B3N. In that section, the floors have to basically can be residential. I'm saying is they don't necessarily have to be if you put retail or an office environment inside that first floor. And if they want to have a second floor and a third floor to have residential, so be it. Comment, Steve.
At least in my book, it says ground stories, residential, service, office, and limited craftsman industrial.
That's right. And
So
then
it
if you
already
look at,
allows for commercial, you're saying take the residential out
right,
of the first floor.
that's all.
So
Then it has
along
to
two-
be,
So along 2000 West, where you have 90% residential, you'll want to put commercial.
well, if the downtown general area only is on 1900, only in that street, then you make a good point. But that general, if you look at that map, is a lot broader than just those side streets or 1950. And the way the policy reads, any part of that general. So if you got general touching 1900, then you can honestly go up there and say, I can put a residential unit, row house on 1900.
So the light blue on the screen is general.
That's correct. And if you look down towards the south end, both sides of that, all that property down there is commercial. Anywhere where there's blue, you can put row houses.
Mhm.
Now, if you want to basically change it so that the only place you can put a row house is that there has to be in a companionship with another residential across the street from it, I'm like that. That's perfect. But if it's going to be on 1900, you can put row houses on 1900 in the general.
thought,
We're not going to
Steve-
have time to go too deep into this. I'll just put that as something to think about. Last one, and then next time we meet, Diane, we'll have your two others. I'd like to also add a purpose statement at the beginning of the document. It's in the thing, what I would ask you to consider writing in there. I think Diane has similar to that. But I think it'd be good if the people who read this document in the future, if it's approved, literally understand the purpose of why we're actually considering this document.
I
So
would
if you'll
agree
read
with that. I would
Okay.
absolutely agree with that.
I can put some stuff together and send it to you.
Okay, I've got some comments. I think Diane had a couple just below that along the same lines. Maybe Steve, if you can, could you look at both of those and see if you can't work up some wording? And let's send that out. And if the council
Send me
agrees
yours.
that we can make that, we'll put that as a purpose statement at the beginning of this proposed chapter. Are you okay
I know
with
I've
that?
got Diane's. I don't think I have yours.
It was in that last sheets I sent, but I'll send it out to everybody again. Okay,
I've seen it, Mayor, so I know it's gone out at one time.
okay. I'll update that. And I really gonna run out of time. Council, I apologize. Normally I do this up front, but I do need to tell you that I had Mayor Robert Dando in accordance with Utah Code Section 52-3-207 4 have determined that conducting a meeting in the Roy City Council chamber presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who would be present at the city council chambers. And based on this determination is due to the fact infectious nature of the potential dangerous health effect for contracting the COVID-19 virus, there is not sufficient space in the city council chambers to provide appropriate safety, physical safety, distancing for the safety of individuals who attend. Accordingly, on this date then, which is 15 December 2020, the meeting will be held electronically without an anchor location. Now, having said all that, we got about 2 or 3 more minutes. Anything else we need to talk about before we break and go into the next meeting? And Diane, I'll bring your issues back up to make sure we cover yours in the next meeting. Anything else we want to talk about before we jump into the next meeting? Okay, seeing none and hearing none, then do I have a motion then to adjourn
So
this
moved.
workshop? Okay, Jan
I'll second it.
and Ann, thank you. All in favor?
Bye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll see you in the next meeting.
Does everyone have their invitation to the next meeting?
I'm not sure I do, Morgan, but I haven't looked again, but I will look right now.
Okay, if you don't, feel free to send me a text. I just want to make sure everybody has it.